My name is Grace Whitmore. I am 68 years old, a retired nurse, and a widow. The house is silent when I wake. Not the quiet of peace, but a heavy, expectant silence that seems to watch me as I move. I slip my feet into the familiar old slippers, soft from years of wear, and pull on Henry's grey cardigan. The sleeve has a frayed cuff, a tiny threadbare reminder of the hands that once held me close. I shuffle toward the kitchen, each step a ritual, each breath a quiet meditation in a house that has grown indifferent to my presence. The first thing I notice is the coldness of the morning air, a thin, sharp breeze that slips through the cracks of the window frames. It carries the faint scent of frost and old wood. I pause for a heartbeat, imagining Henry's voice teasing me about waking too early, his laughter curling through the hallways, warm and alive. But that voice has been gone for 8 long years. 8 years of mornings that feel empty, of a house that holds memories but refuses comfort. I start the coffee. The familiar sound of water dripping into the pot, the hiss as it heats, the aroma rising and filling the small kitchen with something resembling warmth. It is a small comfort, but enough to anchor me. I reach for the 4 glasses of orange juice I've carefully lined up on the tray. Even if no one will notice, I take care to align them neatly, because routine still matters, even when acknowledgement does not. Toast browns, eggs sizzle softly. I slide each item onto the tray, my hands moving on memory alone. The footsteps come in stages. First, Tom, tall, distracted, already absorbed in the screen of his phone. Amanda follows, hair tied back, a faint trace of perfume drifting behind her like a shadow. And then the children, a stampede of small bodies, rushing, shouting, moving with energy I once found adorable, now exhausting. Morning, I murmur softly, setting the tray on the table. No one answers. Tom taps on his phone, scrolling, oblivious. Amanda lifts the lid of her dish, frowning slightly. And don't forget to wash my white dress. I need it tomorrow. I nod mechanically. Of course, I will. The kids barely notice me, shoveling food onto their plates as if I am part of the furniture. A hollow ache grows inside me. I tell myself, they're just stressed. A lie I have whispered for 2 years. Tom's voice cuts through the clatter. Oh, and Mom, don't forget the power bill this week. Another reminder came. He doesn't realize, or maybe he does, that the bills are in my name, not his. Amanda sighs dramatically when their son spills milk. Mom, can you grab a towel? She asks without looking at me. I wipe it silently. By the time the children rush out the door, and Tom and Amanda follow, the house falls silent once more. I pour the last of my coffee into a cup. Lukewarm. Bitter. Metallic. I sip it slowly, the taste reminding me of patience worn thin. I glance at Henry's photograph, sunlight catching his midlife face, frozen in that moment of happiness. The house Henry built when love was simple now echoes with voices that are not mine. I set down the tray and feel the weight of all those years of unnoticed labor pressing against me. I had been looking forward to lunch with friends. Not just lunch, a tiny rebellion, a space carved out for myself. 3 months since I last saw them. I dress carefully, brush my hair, dab on rose perfume, and tie the silk scarf Henry gave me for our 20th anniversary around my neck. It is the one he always said matched my eyes. I stand before the mirror, adjusting the knot, feeling a flicker of self-worth I had forgotten I possessed. Amanda appears at the doorway. Phone in one hand, car keys in the other. Mom, I have an urgent manicure appointment. Watch the kids, she says sharply, already halfway into the living room. Your friends aren't important. Stay. I blink, holding my scarf. My plans vanish, replaced by the same old responsibilities I have carried for decades. I try to protest. Amanda, these are my friends. I haven't seen them in months, but she is already gone, heels clicking across the tiles, leaving only silence behind. I call my friends to cancel, my voice calm, steady, hiding the simmering frustration. Something came up. Next month. I hang up and sit at the edge of my bed. The scarf drapes over my knees. Evening smells of damp soil and lilacs drift in from the garden. Gardening is the only thing left that feels mine. Henry had planted the rose beds himself, teaching me that roses endure suffering yet bloom anyway. I step outside, trimming the dry leaves from the bushes. The children run across the yard, soccer ball bouncing, laughter tearing through the air. One ball slams into the roses, snapping 2 stems clean. I raise my voice. Boys, be careful. That's Grandpa's garden. Tom, sitting on the porch steps, eyes glued to his tablet, doesn't even glance up. It's just plants. I'll buy new ones, he says casually. The words hit harder than expected. I kneel, gathering the broken stems, tears mixing with the cold soil. The garden Henry and I built, the last piece of us, crumbling under indifference. That night, a soft knock comes at my door. Tom stands there, shadows under his eyes, nervous. Mom, I need money. Old business debt. Everything will fall apart if I don't pay. My heart tightens. I reach for the small drawer containing my retirement savings, the one I've carefully built since Henry passed. I press it into his hands. He hesitates, then takes it. Thanks, Mom. I'll pay you back. Promise. I sit on the edge of the bed afterward, staring at the empty drawer. I tell myself I don't mind. Helping family is what love means. But deep inside, I know that love should not feel like being drained one quiet sacrifice at a time. Hours later, curiosity drives me to check the laptop. Aspen Luxury Resort. Receipts, confirmations, extravagant indulgences. All charged to my money, while Tom had insisted we might need to skip presents this year. My hands tremble as I touch Henry's silver bracelet from our 30th anniversary. Once, a symbol of love and commitment. Now, a bitter reminder. I make a decision, I will reclaim control. I call the resort. Cancel the suite, all services, refunds to the original card. I call the airline. Cancel the tickets, ensuring the seats remain empty. I call the bank. Freeze the secondary card. Each call is a small act of liberation. Relief does not arrive, but clarity does. I am done serving others at the expense of myself. Baxter nudges my leg. It's just you and me, boy, I whisper. I call my nephew Ryan, the tech wizard, to change all the smart home passwords. 10 minutes later, the lights flicker once, then stabilize. Welcome, Miss Grace, the house says. My name, finally, spoken aloud in a place that once ignored me. The moving service arrives. Boxes fill the hallways with Tom and Amanda's belongings. The house breathes again. Quiet. Alive. Mine. The rose garden glimmers under pale winter light. Broken petals are temporary, the roots remain, alive, waiting to bloom. I pack a small suitcase. Baxter at my side. I feel anticipation for myself, for the first time in years. I call my sister Ellen. We laugh, a sound I had almost forgotten. The house smells of freedom. Snow crunches under my boots when I arrive in Aspen. Mountains rise, pure and untouched. I sip hot cocoa by the fire. Baxter sleeps beside me. Peace is tangible. I imagine Tom and Amanda at the resort desk, confusion rippling through them as staff explains. All charges were cancelled by the card holder. I smile. Entitlement has limits. My kindness is not a free pass. I call my granddaughter. Grandma, I understand now, she says. Fairy lights behind her illuminate her face. Kindness is for you first. Always protect your peace. Snow swirls outside. Cold. Harsh. But inside warmth, memories, and freedom fill the room. I walk through the empty house in Aspen, touching frost-laden rose bushes, remembering Henry. Life continues. Beauty survives suffering. And so do I. Sometimes life must break you before teaching you to stand tall. Kindness without boundaries is not love. Peace is worth fighting for. I feel the weight of years, but also a strength I never allowed myself before. For the first time, I am free. If my story touched your heart, like, subscribe, and share where you're watching from. Remember, your peace matters. Snow crunched softly beneath my boots as I stepped off the shuttle at the Aspen Resort. Every inhale brought a crisp, cold freshness that made my lungs stretch, filling with something I hadn't felt in years. Possibility, liberation, and perhaps a hint of joy. Baxter tugged lightly at his leash, nose to the ground, sniffing the unfamiliar scents of pine and frozen earth. I laughed quietly to myself, feeling the sound almost foreign in my own ears. I realized I hadn't laughed like this in months. Not the polite, quick laugh I offered to family, but a genuine, unguarded laugh. The resort loomed large and immaculate in front of me. Snow glistened like crushed diamonds over every surface. Icicles hung like delicate crystal daggers from the eaves. The windows reflected a world I had almost forgotten existed, quiet, serene, untouched by daily battles and broken promises. I carried my small suitcase, feeling lighter with each step. My shoulders, which had hunched under the weight of years of service to others, felt freer, unburdened. Inside, the lobby smelled faintly of cedar, polished wood, and something sweet, like vanilla and distant cinnamon. The fire in the hearth crackled softly, a comforting background to the faint hum of conversation. Guests bustled around me, some laughing, some quietly checking in, but none of them mattered. This was my world for the next few days. My sanctuary. I checked in quickly, providing my reservation details. "Welcome, Mrs. Whitmore," the clerk said, a smile lighting up her face. "Your suite is ready. We hope you enjoy your stay." I nodded softly, feeling a flutter of anticipation I hadn't experienced in years. Baxter's tail wagged as if he understood the significance of this moment. Together, we stepped into the elevator, and I pressed the button for the top floor. As the doors closed, I let myself breathe fully, deeply, feeling the weight of months, even years, sliding off my shoulders. The air inside the elevator was warm, scented faintly with vanilla, and it reminded me, strangely, of Henry's old study. I closed my eyes for a moment and let my mind drift, recalling the smell of his old books, the soft crackle of the fireplace, the gentle way he would hum while reading a newspaper, utterly at peace. That peace had once been mine too. And now, perhaps, it could be again. The suite door opened, revealing a room that looked like it had been designed for dreams. Plush carpeting muffled our footsteps. A soft fire burned in the fireplace, mirrored on the polished wood surfaces. The window stretched from floor to ceiling, revealing mountains dusted in perfect snow. I walked over slowly, fingertips brushing the glass. The world outside was pure and untouched. It felt like a painting. It felt like hope. I set Baxter down and watched him sniff the edges of the room, circling once before settling near the fireplace. I unpacked slowly, placing a few personal items from my suitcase. The scarf Henry had given me, a small framed photo, my favorite journal, on the dresser. Each object was a thread connecting me to the life I had before the years of neglect and constant giving. And I realized, with a quiet thrill, that this space was mine. Not borrowed. Not shared with anyone who would take my energy and gratitude for granted. I poured myself a cup of hot cocoa, feeling the warmth seep into my palms as I curled my fingers around the mug. The first sip was rich, velvety, with just the faintest hint of cinnamon. The taste made me close my eyes and exhale slowly, savoring something I had almost forgotten, the ability to choose comfort for myself, without guilt. Hours passed gently. I walked to the balcony and leaned against the railing, watching snow swirl in lazy, sparkling patterns. Baxter sat at my feet, ears perked, eyes following every fluttering snowflake. The sky was the color of pale steel, stretching endlessly above the jagged peaks. I thought about the last week, about the silent cruelty of being unseen in my own home, about the heavy lift of giving until there was nothing left. I thought about my son's entitlement, Amanda's impatience, and the children's obliviousness. And yet here, surrounded by purity, all of that seemed to shrink, fade, and lose its power over me. I spent the evening writing in my journal, each word a careful reclamation of self. I described the snow, the cold air, the way the wood under my fingertips in the balcony railing felt alive, textured. I wrote about memories, Henry's laughter echoing in my mind, the warmth of our shared life, the rose garden blooming in spring. I wrote about dreams I had let slide for the sake of others. And as the fire crackled beside me and Baxter's soft snore filled the quiet, I felt something stir, a quiet but unshakable sense that I was reclaiming my life. Night deepened. The room glowed softly from the fireplace and the small reading lamp on the side table. Snow continued to fall, thickening over the balcony. I placed a hand on Baxter's head. "We're safe now," I whispered. "It's just us." No one's voice pierced our peace. No demands. No reminders. Just the quiet companionship of a dog who had always understood me, and the soft, protective embrace of a place that belonged solely to me. Sleep came slowly that night, gentle and unbroken, unlike the fragmented rest I had known at home. In my dreams, Henry walked beside me through the rose garden, snowflakes resting on his shoulders as we laughed quietly. I felt the warmth of his hand in mine, the world outside muted, irrelevant. Even in the dream, the house and the mountains whispered a single truth: it was my time now. Morning came soft and grey. I brewed coffee in the suite, savoring the ritual that I had once shared with Henry. Every sip was a reminder: life, even after heartbreak, can still offer simple, profound pleasures. The day was unstructured. I wrapped myself in my scarf, led Baxter down the quiet paths of the resort, and watched the snow glint in early light. Each flake felt like a small miracle, like an unspoken promise that life could continue, even after betrayal and exhaustion. I spent hours walking, journaling, watching the mountains change from silver gray to glistening white as the day progressed. I noticed tiny details: a cardinal perched on a snow-laden branch, footprints of animals in the fresh snow, the distant echo of laughter from other guests. All of it felt alive in a way my old home never had. The house that once ignored me, where cameras and sensors recorded my every move but never recognized my presence, could not touch this. Here, I was recognized simply by existing. I stopped frequently to write, recording every sensory detail: the smell of snow melting under boots, the taste of cocoa on my tongue, the way the wind played with my scarf. I noted the clarity of thought that comes when one is free from constant obligations, from emotional drain. It was a revelation that I had almost forgotten existed: the ability to experience life for myself. By late afternoon, I returned to the suite, exhausted but full. I made a simple meal: eggs and toast, nothing elaborate, nothing for anyone else. Baxter received his portion, tail wagging in contentment. I sat by the window sipping tea, watching the sun begin to dip behind the mountains, painting the sky in streaks of pale pink and gold. Evening descended, and I prepared for bed with slow, deliberate care. I ran my fingers over Henry's scarf, tucked beside me, and whispered a quiet promise: I will honor our memories, and I will honor myself. Baxter curled at my feet as I slipped under the blankets, the fire casting dancing shadows across the room. For the first time in years, I slept without guilt, without obligation, without the weight of others' expectations pressing down on me. The next morning, light filtered softly through the tall windows of the suite, brushing the room in pale gold. Snow continued to blanket the mountains outside, each flake catching the sunlight, sparkling like tiny diamonds suspended in the air. I woke slowly, stretching my arms above my head, feeling a relaxation I hadn't known for years. Baxter was curled at the foot of the bed, chest rising and falling gently in rhythm with his dreams. I watched him for a moment, fascinated by the peace that came so naturally to him. I padded to the balcony, my bare feet making soft impressions on the thick carpet. The snow outside was untouched, pristine, each flake a delicate brushstroke on the canvas of the mountains. I inhaled deeply, letting the cold air fill my lungs, imagining it washing away months of fatigue, disappointment, and invisible burdens. Each breath was a small reclamation, a tiny act of freedom. Breakfast was a quiet affair. I prepared my own coffee, piping hot, and a small plate of eggs, toast, and fruit. There was no rush, no expectation, no one to demand or judge. The simple act of nourishing myself became a meditation. I noticed the way the sunlight hit the amber liquid in my cup, how the steam curled upwards in graceful spirals. Baxter sat beside me, tongue lapping at a little dish of milk I had poured, and I realized that for the first time in decades, I was acting solely for myself. Later, I ventured beyond the balcony, walking along the snow-dusted paths of the resort. Each step made a soft crunching sound, the snow compacting under my boots. I stopped frequently, bending to examine tracks left by birds, rabbits, and the occasional fox. Their paths told stories of survival, quiet persistence, and unseen beauty. Reminders that life continued, even in the harshest environments. The air smelled faintly of pine and smoke from distant chimneys, mingling with the cold metallic tang of snow. I let the wind whip my scarf around my neck, letting it sting my cheeks. For years, I had avoided discomfort, had softened myself to protect everyone else. Here, I embraced it, relishing the sharp clarity it brought. I realized I had forgotten what it felt like to be fully present in my own body, in my own life. As I walked, I let my mind drift to memories of Henry. He would have loved this: the mountains, the quiet, the sharp cold tempered by warmth at the fire. I imagined his hand in mine, our shared laughter echoing in the crisp air. The thought brought a smile, tinged with sadness but stronger than the hollow ache I had carried at home. I whispered his name softly, a quiet acknowledgement of the love that had shaped me, that still lived in my heart. Returning to the suite, I sat by the window, journal in hand. I wrote about the snow, the crisp scent, the way light moved across the mountains, reflecting off the ice in 1,000 small, brilliant fragments. I wrote about freedom, the liberation of choosing myself, of waking without obligation, of speaking my own name in spaces that had once ignored me. Each word was a stitch in a fabric I had forgotten I could weave for myself. The afternoon brought a slow exploration of the resort itself. I wandered through common areas, marveling at the understated luxury and comfort. Guests smiled at me, nodding politely, but I didn't feel the need to perform, to accommodate, to anticipate. I was invisible to their expectations, but completely visible to myself. I paused in a small library, running my hands along the spines of books that smelled faintly of wood and ink. I allowed myself to pick up one, a collection of short stories about winter and mountains. I read a few pages, feeling the words sink into my mind like seeds, planting thoughts I had long neglected, thoughts of adventure, curiosity, and personal joy. Dinner that evening was another quiet triumph. I prepared a simple meal in the suite's kitchenette, savoring each bite slowly. There was no rush, no disapproval, no demands. Only me and Baxter, the soft crackle of the fire, and the mountains glowing in the dimming light. I felt my chest expand with relief and pride. It was astonishing how small freedoms, like choosing what to eat or how to spend an afternoon, could feel revolutionary. Night fell with the soft hush of snow. I wrapped myself in a thick blanket by the fire, sipping tea and staring at the flames dancing in slow arcs. My mind drifted to the past, the years of invisible labor, of sacrifices that went unnoticed, of silent disappointment. But here, with the snow falling outside and Baxter at my side, I felt a sense of ownership over my own life. I realized that kindness without boundaries is permission to be taken. Peace is something fiercely guarded. Over the next few days, I settled into a gentle rhythm. Mornings began with long walks, the cold air waking me more thoroughly than any alarm could. I explored paths I hadn't known existed, discovering small clearings where deer grazed, and frozen streams where the ice formed intricate patterns, delicate as lace. I journaled every day, capturing the nuances of the world around me, and reflecting on my own emotions: grief, liberation, joy, and gradually courage. I learned to cook small meals in the suite, experimenting with flavors and ingredients, savoring each step of the process as if it were a ritual. I noticed the sunlight through the window at different hours, the way it shifted across the furniture, casting shadows and patterns I hadn't seen before. I took photographs, capturing moments of beauty and peace, not for anyone else but for myself, as a testament that I existed, that I mattered. One day, I ventured to a small cafe tucked away in a corner of the resort. I ordered a simple pastry and a cappuccino, and allowed myself to sit quietly at a table by the window. Outside, snow fell in wide, lazy flakes, drifting down in silence. I watched families and couples pass by, laughter spilling into the cold air, and realized that I no longer felt the pang of exclusion. I was not absent from life. I was participating on my own terms, in my own space. Baxter and I returned to the suite, where I spent the evening planning our days. I called Ellen, sharing each detail, each small victory, each quiet moment of awe. We laughed together, and her voice, warm and familiar, reminded me that connection did not have to demand sacrifice. It could exist purely for love, joy, and shared memory. In the evenings, I would sit by the fire, journal open, writing letters to myself, reflecting on the transformation unfolding within. I wrote about the cold air, the smell of snow, the way light shifted across the mountains, and the slow awakening of strength I had long denied. I wrote about the courage to reclaim my own life, the audacity to assert boundaries, and the quiet satisfaction of seeing that those boundaries held. One particularly clear morning, I noticed my reflection in the window as I walked past. For the first time in decades, I saw not a tired woman weighed down by obligation, but a grandmother, a widow, a survivor, someone capable of joy and resilience. I smiled at the reflection, whispering softly, "You are allowed to exist for yourself." Baxter wagged his tail in agreement, and I felt a warmth bloom from the inside out. The snowstorm came the next afternoon, soft flakes swirling in dizzying patterns, coating the landscape in white. I sat by the window, hot tea in hand, watching as the world outside transformed. It was a reminder that even chaos can be beautiful, even change can bring clarity. I realized that my home, my family, and the world I had left behind no longer defined me. I had found my sanctuary, my voice, my freedom. The week in Aspen passed in a blur of quiet snowfalls, warm fires, and long walks with Baxter. Each day chipped away at the weight I had carried for so long. Each night reminded me that I was reclaiming not only my time but also my dignity. Yet, in the back of my mind, the image of my house, the family I had served endlessly, still lingered. A small knot of anticipation, and perhaps defiance, had begun to form. By Friday morning, the snow outside the window was a pristine white blanket, untouched and perfect. I sipped my coffee slowly, savoring the warmth against the cold bite of the mountain air. Baxter lay sprawled across the rug, tail occasionally flicking. I ran my fingers along the edge of Henry's scarf, tucked carefully beside me, and smiled. It was time to return, not as the woman who silently acquiesced, but as someone steady, clear, and unafraid. The journey home was uneventful, yet every mile felt loaded with purpose. I imagined the moment I would step back into the house, now free of clutter, now filled with the quiet authority that had been absent for years. Baxter's head rested on my lap in the car, his steady breathing a calm anchor as I planned my next moves. The familiar driveway stretched before me, the smart home standing tall, cold, and unyielding. But this time, I felt no intimidation. I held the key in my hand, a reminder that this house had once been built with love, not for blind obedience to entitlement. I opened the door, letting Baxter bound inside first. The emptiness greeted me, but I did not flinch. I stepped through each room slowly, methodically, noting the memories etched into the walls. Henry's rose garden outside the window glimmered faintly under the winter sun. Broken stems remained, but the roots, the heart of it, thrived. Like me. I called Ryan, my nephew, on speakerphone. "Everything's ready?" I asked calmly. "Every lock, every camera, every device, Aunt Grace." "They're yours," he replied, his voice warm. "Smart home, fully under your control." I walked through the hallways, noticing the blinking sensors, the cameras now silent, the air subtly acknowledging my authority. For the first time in years, this house obeyed me, recognized me, spoke my name with respect. I felt a quiet thrill. Next, I contacted the moving service. Tom and Amanda's belongings were boxed, packed, and ready to be removed. I instructed them clearly, watching each box leave the house. The thud of cardboard and the rip of tape echoed like punctuation marks at the end of a long, painful chapter. By the time the last box was sealed and loaded, I walked through the house again. Each room was empty, light spilling through the windows. Henry's rose garden glimmered outside, a reminder that roots, even when broken, could flourish again. I prepared my small suitcase for another trip, this one symbolic, a journey of complete liberation. Ellen answered on the second ring, her laughter lighting up the line. "Grace, you sound alive," she said. "It's been too long." "Yes," I replied, truly smiling for the first time in years. "It's finally mine again." Later that afternoon, Tom and Amanda arrived unexpectedly, clearly unaware of the change. The smart home remained silent to their commands, indifferent to their entitlement. They entered the driveway, fumbling with keys and access codes, confusion etched into their faces. "Mom," Tom called out, voice cracking slightly. "What's going on?" "I've reclaimed the house," I said, voice calm but unwavering. "Your things are in storage. You may collect them at the address I will text you. Until then, this home recognizes only me." Amanda's sunglasses slipped slightly, revealing eyes wide with disbelief. You can't do this," she hissed, voice sharp. "Yes, I can," I replied evenly. "And I just did." They attempted to use the credit card linked to my account for a faux luxury booking I had previously cancelled. The terminal declined repeatedly, and I watched silently as their faces paled, realizing their entitlement had no power here. Their frustration, humiliation, and helplessness unfolded like a slow, painful lesson in boundaries. I walked past them, Baxter by my side, and placed my hand against the glass overlooking the rose garden. "Roots endure," I whispered, a statement as much for them as for myself. That evening, the house glowed warmly under my control. Lights flickered softly, fire crackled in the hearth, and for the first time in years, I did not apologize for existing. I poured a small glass of wine, sitting by the fire, Baxter resting at my feet. I dialed my granddaughter, her little face filling the screen. "Grandma!" she exclaimed, eyes bright. "I missed you too," I replied, voice trembling softly with joy. "Remember, kindness is for yourself first, to stay strong." She nodded, understanding far beyond her years. I hung up smiling, and raised my glass to the empty room. "To peace," I whispered. "To boundaries. To freedom." Snow fell gently outside, soft and unbroken, a mirror to the calm I had finally secured inside. The house, once a place of silent oppression, now resonated with life under my terms. For the first time, I felt the deep, unshakable knowledge: I am allowed to exist for myself. I am seen. I am strong. I am free. The morning after reclaiming the house, I woke slowly, sunlight spilling gently across the wooden floors. Baxter stretched beside me, tail flicking, eyes bright and alert. I stood by the window, watching the snow melt slowly in the first warmth of winter sun. There was no rush, no obligation, no unspoken demands pressing down. For the first time in years, I breathed without constraint. I walked through each room, noticing little things that had been neglected for so long: a framed photo of Henry on the hallway table, the kitchen counters sparkling in the morning light, the rose garden just beyond the glass door, its roots strong despite the broken stems. Every detail reminded me of resilience, of the small victories that built the foundation of a life reclaimed. Breakfast became a meditation. I brewed coffee, the aroma filling the kitchen, poured milk into a small dish for Baxter, and sliced fresh fruit for myself. Each bite was a deliberate act of self-care. I noticed the textures, the colors, the warmth, and let myself enjoy them without guilt. I walked outside with Baxter, crunching through the snow and feeling the crisp air on my cheeks. Each breath reminded me that I could choose my life moment by moment. No one dictated my pace, my decisions, my joy. I let the cold sting my skin, relishing the sensation, a sharp reminder that I was alive, vibrant, capable of feeling fully. I spent hours in the living room, journal in hand, revisiting memories of Henry and the life we had built together. I wrote about the rose garden, the laughter that once filled the rooms, the warmth of love that had been overshadowed by the constant weight of service to others. I allowed myself to cry, to feel every lost moment, every overlooked effort, and then finally to release them. The act of writing became a ritual of healing. Each word was a reclamation of identity. Each memory carefully examined and honored, not suppressed or used to justify sacrifice, but embraced as part of a life I had lived fully. That I called Ellen, sharing the day's small victories, the quiet snow, the smell of pine, Baxter's antics in the garden. Her laughter echoed in my ears, a melody I had missed for too long. She reminded me that relationships could exist without draining my spirit, that love did not require invisibility. Later, I video-called my granddaughter. "Grandma, I miss you," she said, eyes wide and earnest. "I missed you too, sweetheart," I said. "Remember, being kind doesn't mean giving up your strength. Protect yourself, love yourself first." She nodded, the wisdom in her eyes belying her age. I realized that teaching boundaries, teaching the value of self-respect, was a legacy far greater than any gifts or vacations ever could be. Days flowed gently after that. I arranged the house to suit me, decorating the space with memories and new joys. A small vase of wildflowers from the market, candles scented with lavender and cedar, a soft throw blanket on the couch, each detail a symbol of autonomy. I explored hobbies I had long abandoned: baking, gardening, sketching. Henry's rose garden became my sanctuary. I tended to the plants carefully, removing broken stems, nourishing the roots, watching new buds bloom. Each act mirrored my own growth, careful, deliberate, resilient. Evenings were calm. I read, sipped tea, and watched the snow outside. Baxter curled at my feet, a steady companion. I did not need the approval of anyone else. The house was mine, my memories, my joy, my domain. And in this quiet, I discovered a profound, almost sacred freedom, the ability to live fully for myself. One evening, I sat by the fireplace, the soft crackle of flames warming the room. I held Henry's scarf in my hands, feeling the texture against my skin. I whispered softly, "We did it, Henry. I finally did it." Tears came, not from sorrow but from relief. For decades, I had given until nothing remained. Now, I had space to grow, to nurture myself, to reclaim life's beauty. I realized that peace is not given, it is taken. Boundaries are not selfish, they are necessary. Freedom is not granted by others, it is seized by the courageous. And I had seized it, step by step, choice by choice. I wrote letters to myself each night, reflecting on lessons learned. I documented the quiet triumphs, the reclaimed mornings, the snowfalls that mirrored inner clarity, and the long walks that became prayers of gratitude. I taught myself that happiness is not dependent on others' recognition, that love for oneself is paramount, and that boundaries are a sacred act of self-respect. One morning, looking out over the rose garden, I realized that the roots had survived winter. They were alive, waiting for spring to bloom again. I smiled. My life, like the roses, could endure, recover, and flourish, no matter how harsh the winters had been. Baxter nudged my hand, breaking the reverie. I looked down at him, a soft smile spreading across my face. "It's just you and me, boy. We've got a life to live, full and unbroken." I walked through the house, turning off lights, checking locks, and listening to the quiet hum of a home that now truly belonged to me. The air smelled faintly of lavender, wood, and snow, a mix of memories, freedom, and potential. Sitting by the window, I watched snowflakes drift lazily, each one a tiny emblem of hope. The house was warm, alive, and full of peace. I realized something crucial: the life I had always imagined, one of dignity, respect, joy, and love for myself, was no longer a dream. It was my reality. For the first time in decades, I closed my eyes and exhaled fully, feeling an unshakable calm. I had endured, survived, and reclaimed. I was visible, respected, and free. And in that moment, I understood clearly: kindness is meaningful only when paired with boundaries, and true peace is worth every act of courage it demands.